All right, welcome back. We are WEBD6201, that's client-side scripting in the winter 2020 semester at Durham, and it's week 8, part 2 of our broadcast. We're still talking about Ajax. This is the final part of Ajax we're going to be talking about, and then by the end of the week, like I said, I'll post your lab 3, which is all around Ajax. Next week also, just from a housekeeping perspective, I just talked about test 2 on another video. From a housekeeping perspective, remember that next week we're also going to be doing test 3, which is on Ajax. And that'll be happening on next Tuesday around the same time frame right now. So you'll be given a little bit of a lab. We've been talking about Ajax, and there'll be something for you guys to do which is similar to what the lab will be, or with the similar format. Okay? So yesterday, let's talk about where we left off. I want to bring up yesterday's lesson. Here it is. So I'm continuing with lesson 8. And again, you can download this from GitHub. If you haven't done this one. Okay, and where does this leave us? Let's do it. Control backtick. We'll do light-server. And we'll add in some stuff. Okay, so here we had our home page, and but notice if I click on products, and if I click on any one of these other things, bad things happen right now, right? And why is that? Because we haven't really fixed or finished this stuff off. I want to finish, this part off, which is injecting content with Ajax into your page. That's what this part is all about. Okay, yeah. I haven't done it yet? Okay, just a moment. I thought I should have done it, but yeah, you're right. Restructured project for SPA, which is single page application. Okay, and we'll push that one up. Thank you for that. Okay, you should have it now. All right, so what did we do? So yesterday we talked about a couple of things. We said, look, I've got my index.html file, and instead of me having always to do another nav bar on every page, really the only thing I need to keep is the stuff that's in the head. By the way, there are ways of also injecting stuff from the head, right? Because we can manipulate any element on the page with JavaScript, any element, right? Even stuff in the head. Okay, so if I want to add in additional CSS, or if I want to do anything else, that's totally doable with JavaScript. It's not a problem. The thing that really hurts us is this stuff. I'm just going to actually, one thing I can get rid of is this jQuery min, which is the UI stuff, which I really don't care about right now. But one thing that really hurts us is this. I can't, without JavaScript, I can't inject JavaScript. That's the one thing I can't really do, right? I need to have some way of connecting with JavaScript on the page, right? So my template has to have some kind of link to my JavaScript right now, okay? So at the minimum, I need this, at the minimum, okay? I could still inject this because this is just more HTML. So I could attach this to my main footer. In fact, we should, if you think about it. Why wouldn't we? We're not going to change Bootstrap. We're not going to change jQuery. So, and to show you this, if I was taking this whole section to make it cleaner, is what I'm saying. And if we cut this out and we go to our main footer, if you know if that's under partials under footer.html, and if I inject that underneath like this, right? And let's just kind of put that in there, then it should work still, right? Let me see how that works now. If you go back, you can see still I'm good, right? I'm injecting that stuff. And if you look at it, if I go to inspect, and if I look at elements, you can see that at the bottom, the body itself, I still have, well, that's weird. Did I not update? I did not. Let's try that again. Yeah. So what I meant is, let's do that again. So if I was to inspect, let's do that one more time. And if I go to the elements, you can see that at the bottom, I have my elements, this is what it actually looks like now. I have my main header, my main content, I have my footer, and in my footer I have this stuff, right, plus JavaScript. So JavaScript is actually in my footer now, okay? So I could totally do that, right? And that's okay. So it totally worked. However, I'm not keen on that. I'm not keen on it because my footer should be totally separate than my JavaScript. Anything else that I have in there. So what would I do? And again, I'm just talking about completeness, how to do things right, right? So I might want to put my JavaScript at the end of my body. I could do that. I can inject my JavaScript at the end of my body. So on the body tag, I can put it before my JavaScript tag, or I can put it right here. I can use a div tag for that. I can say a div with an ID of, let's say JavaScript libraries, or so we'll call it scripts. How about this? That's kind of an easy one, right? A div with an ID of scripts. That's where it probably should go. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Because then I'm organizing my JavaScript in a specific spot. I could also use JavaScript or jQuery to kind of target my body tag and then insert before, this tag here, my script tag. I could do that as well. I'm not going to get so fancy though. I'm just going to use a div tag to contain my JavaScript. So that means that I need another document for this, and I'm going to kind of add in a new file. I'm going to call it scripts.html. All right, there's my scripts.html. I'm going to grab the stuff from my footer because it doesn't belong in that other area. So grab this stuff. And again, this is just more examples for you. That's what I'm trying to do, give you more and more examples of what you could do to give you ideas of how to structure your own app one day, right? So I put it in the scripts.html, and you can add as many scripts as possible here. And then whatever scripts I add here will be added to every page. These are scripts that are common among every single page. Why would I add my scripts manually, right? I can add it here, and all of a sudden, boom, all the pages have those scripts, right? As opposed to me going through every single page and adding a script. Doesn't make any sense. All right, so if that's the case then, scripts.html, I got to modify my JavaScript for it to do that, because right now it won't do that. So notice that I have my main header, my main content, my main footer, and then we've made a little function called load page content that I'm going to also inject. Again, it says my home page, that's what it is, right? My main footer, it won't be main footer, it'll be called scripts. That'll be the scripts tag. And it'll be views, partials, and it'll be scripts.html. I want to also take care of this thing where I put home, home, home. That's not required every single time, right? And I didn't want to address it yesterday because we're running out of time, but today I'm going to fix it up and make it look nicer, okay? So again, if you go back and if I test my code, and if I look at my body now, you can see that I have, did I save everything? I did not. So save this one and save this one. And now we can go back and we can see that we have a div tag with an ID of scripts, and inside the div tag now we have this stuff. That's what it looks like. Okay, so it's kind of in there. It's just a separator for us because we want to kind of create our template so that it's all separated and segregated in a nice way. All right, that's what I've done here. Again, everybody has different ways of doing things. Do you have to do it this way? No, but it's a recommendation. It's like, hey, you know what? Maybe what we want to do is we want to compartmentalize our content and our scripts so that's easier for us to maintain later on. And why? Because we're breaking up our scripts and our content in separate files, right? Just like we did with separate JavaScript files, it's easier for you to give it to somebody else and say, hey, you take care of the nav bar. Make it look like whatever you want. You can give it to somebody else. They can make the nav bar, they can test the nav bar, and then when they're happy with it, they update the nav bar, and else every page on your site has the same nav bar, right, as an example. All right, so that's this, but we need to adjust this part still. So again, this works nicely, but when I click on products, no go, right? So what I want to do now is I want to hijack some of these things, right? When I click on any one of these things, I want something to happen, okay? So that's what I'm going to be doing next with JavaScript. All right, so this is all my page content. This loads all my page content. Let's fix up, first of all, the load page content function. right? Because right now, I don't need to inject where. And if I go to the go-to definition for the function, you can see that my load page content function takes a page name, the target element, and the file path, right? And what it's doing is it's saying this. It's saying, I'm using the page name element. So if I kind of click on the page name element, what's going to happen is my function is going to target my page name and set the page to active. But I only want to do this once, right? I don't need to always set this thing to active. I'm setting this thing to active constantly, over and over and over again, right? And it's like, I only want to do this one time, and the rest of the time, if it doesn't do this, it'll just skip this part. I want to be able to do that where I can skip this. So I can say that, well, what if, a couple things can happen, right? I can put the page name at the end, right? That's one option. I can put the page name at the end, and if I put the page name at the end, then it's cool, right? Or I can give these elements default values. Remember how we've done that before, where I can say page name is equal to something, right? So if I don't enter something, well, I get something anyway, okay? So it's really up to you. My recommendation is we move it to the end, the page name, right? So all I need is target element by default, and I'm going to put the page name in here, comma page name, where if you don't add the page name in, that's okay. Page name will be at the end now. Let me just restructure my other JavaScript, because now this would have to change, right? I'm going to really do something that looks like this. So let's cut this out, and then we'll put that in there for the first one. And again, I'm trying to do this so that way you understand. So now, but for these ones, I don't need it, right? I don't need it for this one. So my main header, yes, I do, but I don't need it for the rest. I can kind of simply do something that looks like this. So my first two parameters, and this is how JavaScript is flexible, for my first two parameters, they're required, okay? They have to be in there every single time. However, my last parameter is optional, right? So how do I make that happen? Because maybe I'm not going to have a page name. I might, or I might not. I'm going to say if page name, then, and only then, do I want to do this. So what if I don't supply it with a page name? Then I won't be able to do this, which will cause me to have an error. Okay? Does that make sense? So that's why I've had page name at the end, right? Page name goes at the end, and I can only enter 2 parameters instead of 3, right? And at the end, what we'll end up having is, you know, if we need to add my page name in, great. If I don't need to have it in, that's okay too. The other thing is it says Nav Bar here, and Nav Bar is really not the element that I'm doing, right? I'm saying, hey, take my Nav Bar, but this will be like kind of like the target element, if you will. So here's my target element. My target element, you know, I said like hook into my target element, right? And this is kind of the new information that I want to kind of do. I want to get my new HTML. That's what this is, right? Or new content, right? So we'll just call this content, right? So I'm just restructuring my function so it makes more sense. So it's more generic. That's all I'm doing here, okay? So I'm just renaming some stuff, making it better, and I'm going to say basically this. So I go in here, I make sure that everything's good, and then what I want to do is I want to inject this content, my page name and so on, if it exists. If page name does exist, if it's not null or undefined, then I will inject it. Like I'll change the nav item to active, right? Otherwise I won't. Okay? Let's see if this works. So you can see now it's still good, right? Let's make sure that we saved everything, because sometimes we don't save things. And it's really done exactly what I've done before. There's no difference. It just makes my function more generic. That's all I'm trying to make it, so it's more usable, which we're going to do now. All right, let's just get rid of all this. All right, step 2. So we've done this. This is our little function to load page content. Yeah?
Before you go on, for load page content, when you put page name at the end, is that the equivalent of like overloading it in a way that like you can do it either with or without?
No. See, see, the way JavaScript works, it's pretty funky, right?
Okay.
I could actually pass nothing. I don't have to even have any kind of arguments in there at all.
Okay.
And JavaScript has a default argument list array. I'm just not using it right now because it can be confusing for some, right?
Okay.
So let's suppose I have nothing. I've defined my function, and my function doesn't have any parameters whatsoever. Well, guess what? There's still an arguments parameter by default in the background, an arguments array, right? Where I can have a number of arguments, extra arguments, as many arguments as I want, 20 arguments, 50 arguments, 100 arguments, right? And I can literally access them by array like accessor, like argument 0, argument 1, argument 2.
So have you specified those somewhere?
No. But what I have specified is these, right? These 3. So I'm looking for 3, but I'm only getting 2. So what happens to the last one? It becomes undefined. In other languages, that's not allowed, right? You have to basically say, you know, you have to give some kind of value for each argument or else it'll complain. Here in JavaScript, basic JavaScript, not using TypeScript or anything else, it doesn't matter. If I pass 1 argument, the function's still going to trigger. If I pass 2 arguments, it's still going to trigger. It might give you an error because I'm looking for certain things. I'm doing something with those arguments, right? But if it's undefined, what happens is, and let me show you what this does. If I want to show you what happens, let's do a console log. And if I do page name, just to experiment, just based on your question. So if I was to do that and go inspect, right, you can see that in the console, I'm going to get 3 undefineds, right? Because, and why not 4? Well, because if you look at the what I've done, as I said, here's the first one. The first one I'm giving home, but then I'm getting 3 undefineds. Why? Because there's no third argument, right? And that's what I'm doing. I'm actually catching that third argument, saying if it's undefined, don't worry about this. Don't do anything with it. And actually, what I can do is I can do them for all of them. I go, if this is undefined, well then don't do this. If this is undefined, don't do that, right? So that I can avoid, you know, kind of making errors in my page. I can also use a try catch. That's another thing I can do, right? So, okay, so that's something, and it really depends on what you want to do. Again, in a more structured environment, I would give a default value. That's another thing I could do, or I can make this optional altogether. I can just make, so I can flag this as an optional argument, okay? And if I hover over this thing, you can see that it says target element, file path, and page name, right? That's the argument, and the types are any. Remember, going back to TypeScript, which we talked about before, well, this wouldn't be allowed, right? So if I was going to write this to help us, and again, I highly recommend you guys take a look at TypeScript because it actually helps you write JavaScript better, right? If I was going to rewrite this whole function, let me just take this whole function here, right? Load page content. Okay, so I'm going to take this whole function, and if I went to the TypeScript TypeScriptlang.org playground, right? And if I inject that function in there, right? So you can see what it's doing, right? It says, hey, whoa, what the heck is this? It says parameter target element implicitly has an any type, right? On the right side, it does exactly what I've told it to do. But I can say that my target element is of type, this is what it's looking for, HTML element, right? My file path is a string, right? And so is my page name. My page name is also a string, but it's optional. I can flag it here in TypeScript as optional, right, with a little question mark. So then you can see that it says target element. The reason why it says argument of type HTML element is not assignable to parameter of type string. So maybe what this is, instead of an HTML element, it should be also a string. Let's see if that works out. Yes, that's better. And where are my other errors? Okay, main header, it says that it's got a problem because object is possibly null. Why? Because we don't know, and this is actually bad too. Main header is, and where is this main header coming from? Main header inner HTML is equal to content. And where do I do this? I made a reference somewhere. Oh yeah, here. And this is wrong too, look. So target element, and then this would be I have to change this up too. This is wrong. See, it caught my error. So why is this possibly null? Because what if I don't connect to anything? What if that element doesn't exist? Then that's what this is why TypeScript is so good, guys, because TypeScript is good tooling for us. It's like, wait a minute, this is okay, I'll do it for you, but yeah, you might have a problem, right? Now notice what happens on the right. Did we have any changes happening on the right? Hell no, it doesn't care. JavaScript doesn't care, right? It'll write it the way you want. And depending on the configuration, right now it's targeting ECMAScript 2017, right? I can also target ECMAScript 5, so it changes things slightly. Notice it does a few different things. It doesn't like the word or the variable XHR, because XHR is a reserved word in some cases, right? So it kind of is steering away from that. That's one. If I go to ECMAScript 2015 or later, it'll keep it. It'll be fine with that kind of change, no problem, right? And you can see that I can turn some of these things off. No implicit any, strict null checks. I can turn that off, which will turn off my error. All right, that's what this is. And now you can see that I have no errors because I'm not caring about null checks. Okay. So this is a nice little tool for you to, when you write stuff, it gives you hints on how to write your code a little bit nicer. It doesn't stop anything from happening because JavaScript is just JavaScript. But one thing it does do is it'll do things like remove spaces, and you can like literally just copy paste this code right into your JavaScript, and away you go. Okay. Babel is also another great tool that you can use for this. All right, so now we found something else I forgot, thanks to TypeScript. It's its main header. Well, that's not the main header anymore. It's whatever the element is, right? The containing element, right? That's what it is. So we'll call this container. I'm just going to rename this thing. So rename symbol to container. So my container, right, whatever the container is now, this is more generic again. I'm going to look at the target element, whatever that is, and I'm going to hook into it. That's what's going to give me my container, right? And then I'm going to say, well, my container's inner HTML is going to be equal to this content. That makes more sense, and it's definitely more generic again, which is what I wanted. Okay? So if you wanted to take care of that possibly null thing, right? Then what I could do is, if it's null, here's my try, right? Then in my catch statement, I could produce an error. I could say that, because this won't produce an error, right? If I don't do anything, the try catch will actually catch the error and do nothing. It'll actually resolve in a non-error. So I can say something like, well, I can throw an error based on, improper input, something like that. I can also make a try catch around different elements. Like, for example, I can make a try catch around this element or an assert, right? Something like that, which can basically output errors, error messages, all that kind of stuff. I can do those things. So so your functions are more foolproof, if you will, or bulletproof. Not going to do that right now. Okay, so that is the load page content function, and we could add some documentation for this, and I guess I'm using document this. Remember, that was that little extension that I used for JavaScript or for Visual Studio Code. Basically, you do /, and I can just choose document this, and it'll basically say that these are the parameters: target element, file path, and page name. And I can give a little blurb on what this thing is about, which is this function injects content into the container, the target elements container, right? And I can say something like the page name parameter is optional. Something like that. So you can see that, hey, this is an optional parameter, right? I can also specify the type in here. So here, what document this does is it says these are any type, ****. But really what these are strings. So I can say this is a string. These are all strings, right? And I can also say it returns void, right? Because that's what it does. At return returns void. Again, this is just documentation. You can look up any kind of really cool documentation online. There's almost like coding just for documentation, how to code your documentation. And the great thing about document this is it prepares your documentation so it can be read by an automatic documenter. So you can create your own wiki automatically for it. It can basically scrape your site, and then boom, it'll create documentation for your API. So really, really cool stuff. That's why I include it. It's kind of an extra, and I'm sneaking it in just in case you wanted to do that later on. All right, so what does this do then? If I go back and I try and use it, you can see that if I was to use it, if I hover over it now, it gives me some information, right? Anything that I put in there, it shows me what these things are, right? So here's my parameters, and notice what it does automatically for me. It actually gives you the parameter list now with their types. See, string, 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 and void. I did that with document this. It actually formatted for me so that you know how to use my little function, okay? Which is totally cool. If you're going to make a little function for a friend of yours or another colleague, if you're working in the in the industry, then you want to document the crap out of your stuff, right? Why it's really, really good. Again, I'm not into over documenting. I think over documentation actually slows you down, but it's really good to share how your thing works with other people. All right, cool. So now what we need to do is I want to do something similar to this with my nav bar. I want to detect, first of all, if the nav bar is there. Is the nav bar there? And if the nav bar is there, if it finishes loading, right? I want to detect if the nav bar has finished loading, right? Then I can do stuff. Okay, question, how the heck am I going to do that? Think about it now. I want you to think about this, right? I want to wait till something finishes loading, and then after I finish loading, I have my nav bar. Because if I check my nav bar now, right, it's asynchronous, right? Which means it may or may not be there. So let's do this. So if I say something like, I want to get down here in the display content, I want to hook into my nav bar somehow, right? Let's just do it, right? So I'm going to say something like, okay, let my nav bar is equal to, and let's just see what it looks like in my header. So my header is, again, I've got my nav, right? And you can see that I don't have any kind of item here on my nav bar. Let's look for a specific item like the home, ID of home. Let's see if we can hook into this thing. So I'll say let home as an ID of home. Okay, let's see if we can do that. So I'll say something like, instead of nav bar, we'll say let my home link be a document.getElementById, and then we'll say home, right? And we'll say console log home link. And then you might be forgiven to think that if I did that here, because I'm doing it in order, right, that my nav bar would be loaded by the time that I'm accessing it, right? But if I did this, and if I go back to my code for a second, so let's go back to my page, right? And if I look at if I inspect, and if I go to my console, well, you're going to see, well, that's wrong. Hold on a second. Let's clean that up. I actually added a console log somewhere. Here it is. Let's get rid of this console log. All right. So again, I get null, right? Why is that? Because I don't have a nav bar. Yeah.
It's asynchronous, so all it does is it calls our function, then moves on to call the next one without finishing the last.
That's exactly what happened. So
if you made it synchronous, then you have to wait.
okay, so there's advantage and disadvantage to this. So the advantage of making it asynchronous is it's going to be loading whenever it wants, right? The disadvantage of making it synchronous is asynchronous is because I'm going to run into this problem. That's the disadvantage, right? The advantage of making it kind of like synchronous, so it has to be blocking, right? So I'm going to wait for everything to happen, right? If I did that, the advantage to that is then I could do this and it would work, right? So for example, if I went back to my functions, right? And I said, well, you know what? Instead of me making all this asynchronous, which is true, I call this false. Yeah?
What if you made the last one synchronous, Robert? So all the ones would just start, and then the last ones would start, and by the time it ended,
I like your thinking. I'm getting jumpy. I'm jumping here, right? Go on.
And then once all the asynchronous ones are done,
Yeah.
then the synchronous one would be done about then. And then once you go on to the next line, you would be.
I mean, I can make the link together and stuff. I can loop them together. But there's some things we can do. So if I make this false, let's make it false. See what happens, right? So go false, And then I'm good, right? Look, hey. But look what it says. Deprecation. Synchronous HTML request on main thread is deprecated because of its detrimental effects to the end user experience. For more help, go to. Yeah.
Could you do it through an event listener?
I could. What event listener would I use?
I'm not sure. On load, maybe?
What's loading? Right?
You gotta wait on the nav bar, so I assume that, but I'm not sure how you do it.
You're on the right track. So I got to figure out. I want to make an event, and I want to trigger an event that happens when something finishes loading. Right? That's what I want to do. So when it's finished loading, when something's finished loading, when the thing is done, right? I want to do something else. That's what I want to do. Right? I want to trigger something that says we're good to go. Right? So you can see that this would work, but not recommended, right? Totally works, but not recommended. Okay, so again, let's take a look at that. So if I say Ajax loaded event, is there something like that? Is there something like how to bind events to loaded content? And it says you could do, right, this thing, and then that doesn't really work, right? Because you're trying to load something. Now, this is delegation. This is using Jquery, which is what I kind of did already. And I kind of said, well, when it's dynamically loaded, then it'll work. This is a new thing. So something that's triggering when it's done loading, right? And which is what this little link means is what I did with you guys for your test. Remember that little thing? See the structure here of this Jquery link? What this is saying is it's the click event. It's an on click instead of a click event. But we have this. It says, take a look at the document, and whatever my link is, anything that has a class of my link, add this new event listener. That's what it's doing. It's actually binding it to the entire document. And it's using a delegate for it to happen. So a little bit of advanced. That's why I said don't modify your test. Don't change those things. I built it just for that kind of reason. So new items, for example, new tasks that I enter in your test, they automatically have all the event listeners tagged onto them. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. Okay, because remember, the event listener only triggers for events that have already been on your page, not things that have been dynamically added to your page. Okay, so that's kind of a thing. So that's not what we want. So again, what I want is Ajax complete. Okay, there's some, remember we talked about Jquery and how Jquery can help us out? So it says Ajax complete. It says register a handler to be called when Ajax requests complete. So it's an Ajax event, and they give us some examples of how to do this with Jquery. Now remember, anything you can do with Jquery, you can do with JavaScript, but let's see what this does. So it says document dot, so on the entire document, when Ajax is complete, we trigger a function. We have an event, an XHR object, and settings, right? So this is how it goes. So here's my event, right? As an example, this is the example. If settings.url is equal to this, then do something else, do a log or whatever, right? And xhr.response text, that's going to be equal to whatever the response text is going to be, right? And this is based on the whole document when Ajax is complete. So if I was going to do this, Ajax complete, then I could probably use Ajax with Jquery the whole time. And on that, this is a good segue for what I want to try and do with you guys for Ajax and Jquery. And if you look at that PowerPoint, on the bottom part, we talked about, here it talks about synchronous and asynchronous. It talks about making that wait and stuff for those kind of things. But we're really waiting for on ready state change, right? We could also do that. We could wait for each of those on ready state change events. When it triggers, I could send a message. I can update a specific function. I could have a callback function that updates when those things trigger. I could do that too. So another function that kind of updates. I could extend my function. That's what I could do. I could make my little function so that it says, is there a callback function that I want to call? Is there a callback function? And if there's a callback function, right, then if that is defined, if I define a callback function, then what it'll do is when these events trigger, then it'll fire off this callback function, which I could put in some code. That is totally doable, right? Because I already have the structure already in place. Yeah, what else?
For document.ajax complete, is that specific to document, or can you change that to like navbar.ajax complete?
You know, I'm not sure that you can. That's the honest truth, right? So I'm just going to skip down here because this is talking about updating content with JSON-P. We don't care about that right now. And this is interesting. It talks about using Ajax with jQuery. So I want to talk about Ajax with jQuery first, and then we'll go back and talk about it. So again, you can do something that looks like this, .get. All right? So .get is like all that setup that we did with, remember I talked about jQuery is really great for one really good thing, which is Ajax. It makes Ajax easier? Yeah, it does. But here's why it makes Ajax easier. Because from a coding perspective, it looks like this. So I want to, inside of this method, I want to load this document and inject it in there. Done. I mean, it literally is that easy. There's nothing else like better than this. Load. Which actually uses, you know, Ajax and injects HTML inside that automatically, right? Or if I want to be more specific, I could do something like get, right? So $.get, and then I can say, okay, so what am I getting, right? What kind of input am I injecting? And then I can, what is my callback? I could do that too. So that's definitely something that I can do. Get JSON, that makes more sense, right? Instead of me doing that JSON data that I did before, where I put in the data, get JSON back, and all that kind of stuff, I could use $.get.JSON, and it'll do it all for me. It'll convert it to JSON, the text content that I'm getting back. All that kind of stuff I'm going to get back, I can use jQuery for. And I've given some examples here if this is what you want to use. Remember, you can use the document.ready, and I can, if I click, I can load different things, and I can inject things in different spots, right? So that's kind of the really cool part about Ajax and jQuery. And this is for you guys to explore. I think this is some great stuff. But again, I'm more of a hardcore JavaScript dude, and I think it's better to understand how to do this on your own. However, there's some great stuff in here. For example, using the $.each, this is like a for each loop. Like, it's that easy. You can, like, scoop through each of the items in your JSON file and inject them into your code. So really cool stuff. And you can definitely take a look at this stuff, but we're going to do it. And this is the Ajax complete. All right, so one way we can do it is this, right? We already have some stuff. We already have functionality here, right? I have this XHR object, and I don't want to make this asynchronous. So I want to put this as true. Now, what we could do, here's another thing we could do. If you really want to have this functionality, you wanted the control, you want to be able to trigger whether it's true or not, just add in another parameter, right? Asynchronous, yes or no? If you said async, let's just do this like this. Right, so I can say async, and if I said async is equal to, by default, true, right? Then what I've done is I've created a parameter that is optional. Now, just to do this, if I was going to do this coding again, document this, what it'll do is it'll say parameter boolean async is true, and square brackets. Notice that square brackets means that it's optional whenever I do that, okay? So this is really cool. I just want to take this part. I'm going to put this on this part. And what I also want to do is, because we're going to have that little parameter there in a second, and I also want to put square brackets around page name. So I want to say that, you know what, page name is also optional, because we know that square brackets mean optional. Okay. So page name, async is true, means that if I don't use it, and I'm going to put async down in here, so I can specify whether it's asynchronous or not by basically adding an async element. I can put async as true. Okay. And if I was to hover over this now, if I go over to the here, and if I hover over this, it'll say that. It'll say, like, look, page name, notice the page name has a question mark over it now from a documentation perspective. It says, hey, it's optional, right? And async is a Boolean, right, as an example, because we know it's a Boolean. We're setting it to true. It's also optional, right? And we could specify that. Page name parameter is optional, and so is async parameter. Async is true by default. We could say that as well. So one thing we can say is the page name parameter is optional. The async parameter has a default setting of true and is optional. Again, some good documentation for you guys. If I hover over that, you can see that more information gives me more information for what this does, right? So you know how to use it. Okay? So we can definitely do this. We can definitely do parameters like this, right? Async is true. I can also have a callback function. So load page content, and then I can pass a callback function, so when that page content is finished loading, it triggers that callback function. Okay? However, I just want to point this out, that the order matters here, right? You can't just randomly assign stuff, right? These elements have to be assigned in this order. It's not like you can choose, I want to do file path, but not anything else, right? It doesn't work like that, okay? And if you wanted to try this out, and if you wanted to make it so that each of these parameters work asynchronous or differently, there's ways of overloading your functions in order for you to do that. And we'll talk about how to do that in a bit. So I want this other parameter. So again, page name, definitely something that's going to be like very, very last. I'm just putting it out there for you guys. Page name should be like last, okay? Or page name should be second last like this, right? And then we want a callback function. So it should be target element, file path, callback function, page name. Does that make sense? So we'll say callback, right? And the callback is a function. So again, if I was going to specify this, so file path, and then @param, and I'll call this a function, which is called a callback, right? That's a callback. And my callback, notice page name and async is true is like way over there, right? I have to rejig this thing. But basically what I'm going to do is this. When this is true, right, in here, then I finish loading stuff, right? Isn't that true? So if I finish loading it, well then why not call the callback function? So callback. Can't I do that? Can you think about that? I made a callback function. I'm passing in a reference to the callback function, right? So when I'm finished loading, I call the callback function. The callback function can be named whatever you want. For example, I don't know, Nav Bar, right? Okay, let's try this out. So now we have to fix it because this doesn't do this, right? So what I want to do is I want to make a callback function, which is optional, again, for all these other ones if I want to. The ones that I've added in, remember I've added them in a specific order for things, but what I want to do is this callback function is something that I want to add in second, okay? So let's suppose I make a function called Nav Bar. We'll call it something like I want to, activate the Nav Bar, or I want to, what am I doing with the Nav Bar? I'm actually manipulating the Nav Bar so that I can, when you click onto it, it works, right? So I'll call this update Nav Bar, or maybe we'll call it activate Nav Bar. Activate Nav Bar, okay? So that's the callback function, and we'll pass activate Nav Bar here. Activate Nav Bar. Activate this one. No. That one. Okay. Okay, so activate Nav Bar is the callback function, right? That's what it is. And it's going to be passed into this function right here. It's a reference to this function here. That's the callback, right? Okay, that makes sense? So this is something that's happening. Here's the callback. So callback is being called here, but we're calling it activate Nav Bar. So the name for the callback is activate Nav Bar. We're passing a reference to this function here into our load page content function, which is here, right? Let's make this also optional because sometimes we don't need to have that. Maybe I don't want a callback. Maybe I just want to load some content. Like for example, in the last part, on my footer, I don't need to do anything with that. I don't need a callback for my footer. So it's going to be optional. Okay? Yeah.
Sorry, for load page content, throwing an activate nav bar, how does it know that is the function activate nav bar?
Because I'm passing it as a parameter.
But it's not a function. Right?
But it is.
Like you don't have to pass in the
No,
braces.
the braces mean call.
Okay.
The function name, remember we did this before, look. Way down here, we did this all way down here. At the bottom, look what we did, start,
Oh yeah, okay.
right? We did that, yeah.
Okay.
I was thinking maybe we could send the target element to the callback.
Sure, yeah, I like that.
Because mainly people would want to call back because they're waiting for an element to be loaded.
I could, yeah. So the target element, which is going to be the area that I'm targeting, you're talking about remember what the target element is. It's the container that contains our nav bar. It's the container that contains our whatever, right? Does it really need to know? That's the question. Unless you're going to turn it on or off. I mean, it could be something that you want to add in as a functionality, right? But I don't think I need it right now. Let's get back to that. I like your thinking though, because anything we pass into the callback is a good thing, right? Like data, whatever data we want to pass in. Okay, so that's cool. The other thing we can do here, instead of all these parameters in JavaScript, is I could pass it a parameter list, right? Or I can pass it a parameter object called params, right? And params would be an object, and the params object would have a class, the params class, right? Think about this for a second, right? This gives me really a lot of control now, right? Instead of me having to update whatever I want, I pass in my params as an object, right? So instead of me passing each individual parameter, I create an object of type params, right? And then I just assign properties to each of the things I want, and the things I don't want have default values, which I can set up inside of my class, which are really cool. So I can instantiate an object of type params, pass it in, right? Which is another thing we could do. But for now, let's leave it like this. And let me look at what it shows me here from a documentation perspective again. So if I hover over, it says, all right, cool. So I got my target element, my file path, and a callback, which is optional, which is a function. You can see that, right? And then my page name, my string, and async is true. All that kind of stuff is by default, right? So you can see that those things are there. But the ones that are required, I need to have my target element and my file path. And so you see, I've done a lot of the work that jQuery would do for you, right? I'm just doing it manually with my own function. Okay, it's a massive function, but it does whatever I want it to do. All right, let's try this nav bar stuff. So let's see if it works. I want to take this code right here, home link and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to put it in here, right? And let's see if that activate nav bar function does all this stuff for me, right? And when we go back, if we go back to our page, what I'm hoping to see is there's not a problem. All right, and let's see what we've done wrong here. So it says, we've got this, but it says uncaught type error, callback is not a function, right? So this is one thing that we have to be careful about, right? Because what's happening is, you know, it's giving me an error, but it actually does work, look. Right, it totally works. And it says that on 94, right, I'm passing a callback. But guess what? There is no callback. That's why I'm getting that error. Remember that error is undefined? That's why I'm getting this error. There is no callback for the other three. The only time I have a callback, right, is when I pass it. So therefore, I must define a callback or have that little check, if callback, right? So going back then to fix this problem, I'm going to wrap this in an if statement. I'm going to say if callback, and then kind of call that back, right? And when I do that, you can see that those things go away. Because it basically checks to see, basically what it's saying is, does callback exist? If it's null or undefined, this will fail. This check will fail in JavaScript, right? And if it fails, then it won't do this. It'll skip over this thing, and it won't do this callback at all, right? Yeah.
Is callback already defined like somewhere else?
No, we made it up here.
Wait.
That name is the delegate. So think of it this way. I make a friendly name. I can call this Tom.
Sure.
Right?
Okay.
Here, let's do it. So I just called it callback. So let's rename this thing, rename symbol to Tom. Right, there we go, Tom. So now you see I'm calling Tom.
Yeah,
right?
So it's just like a self.
Yeah, so you see it's just going to work, right? It doesn't matter what I call it, right? The idea is I've called it callback because it's the most common name. Makes sense to me, makes sense to you. The callback, right? And then I have some extra stuff. My page name, I can specify a page name if I want. My callback is also something that's an option or whatever. And it really depends on how I do it. You can see that I have, this kind of stuff happening. I can have different parameter sets for each function. Okay. Okay, so activate nav bar is definitely something. I've got my page content, right? That's in here. My page content loads. That's what this does. This happens for my, load page content, right? And then I have this one, which is my main footer and scripts. Okay, so I want you to keep an eye on this. The only one I really need is this one. Activate nav bar, right? Because nav bar has to load. When my nav bar is loaded, I can do stuff to my nav bar, which is going to be the same on every page, right? Which is going to, depending on which button I pressed, it's going to call a different function to inject different content. Yeah? All right, let's do it. So here's activate nav bar now. And again, I'm hoping we can finish today because you can see we can get as complex as we want here, right? So first thing, I have access to my home link. And let's be strategic about this. I'm going to just get rid of scripts for now and my footer. And I want to look at my header, which is just what the thing that I really want to look at here. So here's my header, right? And you can see all we're looking at here is the nav bar. That's all we're looking at here. So I want to get references to all this. Home, products, services, about, contact. I want to get references to all this stuff, right? And I want to create a links, a bunch of, an array of links, if you will. I could do that, which each one of these things is an array of links, right, for home, products, services, about, contact, and so on. Okay? JavaScript can help us with this. JavaScript can help us with this. All right? And what we can do is we can loop through each of the list items inside of our nav bar, right? I can go for each element, for each list item inside of our UL, right? I want to add a link, to the ID, depending on what the ID is. I don't care what it is. I can add it in to some kind of an array. I could do this, right? So I have an array that I call links, let's say as an example, right? Could I do this? And each of those links, each of those items, if you will, right, is I can create something called an associative array. So arrays are different in JavaScript. Arrays are like an array list, right? Arrays are really loosey-goosey. They act as a list as well as an array, as well as a map. They do all those things, okay? They're really awesome. And the way I can do it is this. If I say that whatever the array is, the friendly name for index, my reference for index is this, I can create an associative array for all those things, right? And I can access each of the elements in the array with an index, or I can access it with the friendly name for the array element itself. And I only have to do this one time. I have to do this mapping, a one-to-one mapping one time. I can try and do it automatically, right? I can try and do it automatically where I can have friendly names for this, right? So, or I can just do it manually, whatever you want. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So if I go back to this, sure, I can make a home link equal to this, and I can do the next one equals to that, and I can do the next one equal to that. I could do that. I could also create an array. I could say that the home link, I could say the links array. So I can say, first of all, let my links, or nav links, equal to some kind of array. Okay? And I could say that nav links, and I could call this home, is equal to this. That's something you haven't seen before, right? Where my index is a string. My index is not a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a string. Okay, I can do this too. And if I was to copy this, and I'm just going to copy this over and over again, I could create references for each of my items, right, in my header. So I can say products, services, about, contact, and login. So products, services, about, contact, and login. Yeah? And let's just, I want you to think about this for a second, guys. Think about this as another language. If I was going to do this as another language, right? Not JavaScript, but if I was doing this with C# or C++ or something like this, right? I got this, right? And I want to say nav link. I want to say, let's look at nav links. All right, it would be nice if I spell it properly. Nav links. This one should be respelled. By the way, if I want to, I think it's Shift Alt. Yeah, I can kind of select everything here in Visual Studio Code by pressing Shift Alt and then clicking down, right? If I did this, I can see I have this long cursor, and I can edit everything at once, like this. Watch, right? So I can say something like, this should be called Nav Links, right? See how I edited that all at once? You can do that with VS Code. So I want to print out nav links now. I want to see what this nav links things look like when I do this, right? So let's see what this does, okay? So you can see that I've got an array, and I've got each one of these things is named now. Home, products, services. And you can see that the array is an associative array, okay? It's an associative array, okay? If I want to say navlinks.length, okay? If I want to say how big this length is, I can see that the length is 0. I don't really have a length for this thing. It doesn't really act like an array, right? Navlinks.length doesn't work, right? But can I loop through each of the nav links? Can I do a for each or a for in? Is there something that I can do to show me all the links? And this is important to do, by the way, guys. So if I do a for each, let's do a for each for a second. For each nav links, for each link in a nav links array, I want to console.log the link. Can I do that? Is that possible? And the answer is no. Right? Remember we tried this before with an array that's not an array. This isn't an array. This is an associative array, right? It has a different prototype, right? This won't work. What else can we do though? Is there something we can do that's similar to this? So we can say, okay, what about, instead of a for each, there's also a for in and a for of. So this is a for in. For in, key in object. For every link in my object, which is nav links, well, then what I want to do is I want to show that key. Show console.log. Show me the link. Show me the link. Right? Hey, look at that. It does that. That's the actual link itself. So it does this type of stuff. Keep going. Yeah, go ahead. Are you getting ideas?
Well, not really, but because the indices are strings, is that why length isn't working?
Yeah, it's because I've created a different thing, a different beast here. That's what I've done, right? So console log link. Okay, that's interesting. Nav links, right? I could do for every link in nav links, console log nav link. Could I not do this? And the answer is no. Nav links. There we go. There. And you can see that works. So now these are each of the links in the nav link, right? So this is definitely a way of looping through. Well, if I can loop through them like that, right? And I have each of the links set up to the way I like, I can do stuff with them, right? Is there not another way that I could set this up automatically? What if I want to add 2 more links, 10 more links, 100 more links? Am I going to wait? Am I going to go through and enumerate every single one? Well, that's kind of a weird thing to do, right? So maybe what I want to do is automatically detect how many objects there are in the UL, right? So let's do a different thing. All right, so we'll just comment this up for now. All right, so I'll say edit, and we'll say toggle block. And then this is not Ajax, this is more like JavaScript 201, all right? Instead of like, we're just getting a little bit more with JavaScript, a little bit more we can do with stuff, which we didn't really cover, all right? So, okay, if this is true, I make a nav links array, all right, whatever. Is there a way of tagging into our nav bar itself? So you notice that the nav bar has a UL, and the UL has a class, right? We know that there's only one UL on the page. 100%, we know there's only one UL. Now there could be more than one. We could tag into it by get elements by tag name. So I could do that. I could say let, my UL is equal to document.getElements by tag name, right? And my elements by tag name is going to be the UL. So I got a reference to the UL, and I want the first one because maybe there might be more, right? Standard JavaScript 101. Now I'm going back to that. So I got an access to my UL. And I can basically loop through each of the children, right? Because I have a number of children, right? So remember how we did this before? So I want to do a for each. If I do, like, example, console log, and I go ul.children, right? And I want to do children 0, right, as an example. Remember this? Children 0. What do I get when I get children 0? Well, I get the first list item, right? Okay, children 0. So if I can do this, the children array of 0, then I can loop through each one of them. I can say something like a for. Can I do a, first of all, one more time. I'm going to do that change for a second. Children, can I do a children.length? This is the test for me. If I can do a children.length, I can do a for each loop. 6. Hey, guess what I can do? If I have a length for children, I can do a for each loop, right? So that means I could do this. I could say for each ul.children child, for each child in the ul.children array, right? What do I want to do? I want to get the child, right, attribute, right? The attribute, which is the ID. I want to print this out. I want to see what the child ID is. So console log, can I get the child ID? Hear me out for a second, guys. Can I get the child ID? And it says for each children.for each. Did I spell it wrong? ul.children.for each. That kind of worked. Hold on a second. ul.children. Okay. If I did this, ul.children, let children equals to ul.children. I'm just curious. Sorry, comment this out for now. Bear with me. Yeah, that works. So then, can I not do a for each on that one, right? Can I not do? Should I not be able to do this? Children.for each child. Can I not do that? No, it doesn't let me do that. But maybe we do the other one. We'll do the for in again. Oh, or is it the for of? For of child in children. Console log. Yes. All right, we're good to go, right? For every child and children, yeah? Hey, guys, if I have child and children, if I go child.id, how about child.id? Can I do this? Yeah, I get the IDs. And if I can do that, then guess what I can do up here with my nav links? Now we're cooking. Isn't that true? Couldn't I just not do this? Could I just not do nav links home like this? Take an example of this, pop it in here, nav links child ID. Child.id is this. Child.id. Couldn't I not do this? Are you with me? Instead of doing all this, that doesn't make sense, right? I don't want to do all this work. I want to be, I'm the lazy programmer, right? That means I don't need all this. Instead, I can do this. And if I can do this, that means I can get a list of all my children. Even if I have more nav items in the future, I can have 10 nav items more, or I can add another one. It'll get a link to that thing. And I can access it by its friendly name, whatever that friendly name. Whatever the ID is that I give it, I have access to it. Let's see if that's true. Right? So there it is, home, product, services, about, contact, and login, but I never specified what they are. It just does it for me. So I have an associative array. I've created an associative array of each of the children that are of the UL, right? Each of the children in the UL. And I've created all those links. All those links are there. So now I can do something else. I can say, well, if that link, the child has the ID, this child, right? Here's my ID. Right? It's going to get a reference to the entire object. This is what this is. What does each of the children have? Well, it has a link. Inside the link, there's an anchor tag, right? Inside the anchor tag, there's this href, right? But I don't want these hrefs, right? It doesn't make any sense. I want, when I press on the home button, I'm going to load the home content. When I press on the, anchor tag for the products, I'm going to load the products content. That's what I want. Okay? So how do I do this? I'm going to create, each of these things is going to be replaced by a hashtag because I don't care about what they are right now. Undo. And we're running out of time again, but I do apologize. I want to try and get this done so that way you understand how we can start with this, because this is going to be part of your stuff we're going to do with Ajax. All right, so there it is. So we know this is the case. It's not going anywhere anymore, right? It's going to show up nice, but it doesn't go anywhere. But I want to target the anchor element inside there, this link, right? I'm going to hook into this link. So when the link is clicked, add event listener, click. Right? When I click this link, so going back to this, I have a list of all my links, right? I get a reference to them. For each of them, for each link that I create them first, right? Could I not, and I don't have to do this here, I don't have to make 2 for loops here. I don't have to do this, okay? Could I not do it in the same for loop where I get a reference to it, and then what I do is that I add an event listener to each of them. But I want to get an event listener to the anchor tag that's inside of it. How do I get access to the anchor tag that's inside of the link? So again, I want to look at the link. So console log link. And then how do I look at the anchor tag that's in there? I want to look at my children, right? Again, I want to look at the children of the link, and it's the first child, is it not? Yeah? Isn't this the first child? Well, the anchor tag is the link, right? It has a link. It's a linkable. It's clickable, right? I can click on this thing. So when the anchor tag, the child, is clicked, if that's true, then I can do something that's in here. I can say that nav links child ID. Now, after I set the child ID up, I could say that dot children 0 dot add event listener, the click event. I can make it so that when the click event is clicked, I want to call a function, right? My callback function. Well, depending on which one is clicked, right? I want to activate that thing, whatever that thing is, like call whatever this function is called, right? And I have a callback that is going to be triggered whenever I trigger this link. So for now, let's just comment this out. And I'm going to show you this for a second. Again, I'm thinking through this with you, all right? So you can see my thinking. Here's my callback function, right? And let's just put a console log in here, and we'll say clicked for now, so we can see what this is. Are we good? So if I go back to my home page now, right? Here's my home page. If I click on products, we should get clicked. Services, clicked. About us, clicked. Contact us, clicked. Home, clicked. See that? So what I've done is I've attached an event listener to each of my links, right? And I want to, depending on which one is clicked, right? We know what the child ID is. Do we not? That child ID is the one that got clicked, right? So whatever the current child ID is, we're inside this child. So I can say that child ID is clicked, right? So we'll say child.id is clicked. You can try and do that. Let's see, can we do this? Child ID is clicked. So if I click onto it, you can see products is clicked. Is clicked. Products is clicked. About us is clicked. Services is clicked. See that? Once we have that, sky's the limit, right? I know which one is clicked. Child ID, right? If I know child ID is clicked, right? Could I not call a function with that name? Let's try it. What about if I had a function like this, right? My function is called, let's make it the first one, because what we're looking at is my header. Guys, and bear with me, don't freak out when I'm doing this, okay? But let's look at home. All right, so we'll make it the home function. Function home. I mean, it's a weird name. We can make it more creative, but let's say, and just in here we'll say console log home function is clicked. Or we'll say home function. How about that? Home function. All right, we know that child ID is clicked, but what if, let's just take it one step further and just go child.id. Is that allowable? Am I allowed to do this? Just saying, I don't know. Is that possible, right? Well, maybe not, but let's see what happens, right, when I do this. If I click on inspect, we're close though, right? We're close to that. So if I click on this, it's going to say, it's not going to work. Child is not a function, right? Because we clicked on products. What about if I click on home though? So anything I click on, doesn't matter what I click on, it says child ID is not a function, right? So I want this to be the callback, right? I want this to be the callback. So what if I said something like this instead? I said that I want a list of callbacks. So let's suppose I have a list of callbacks. So let callbacks be equal to some other list. Let's just say, right? And just like I have here, right, with my callbacks, it's just going to be an ID, right? So I can say something like callbacks, right? Child ID is equal to child ID. Could I not do this? And if that's true, can I not just do callbacks child ID by hello? I mean, it's kind of the same thing, right? Is it not? Well, let's see if that works. And bear with me with this funky code because, you might see this as weird, but let's just see what happens, right? So if I click on home now, well, it says callbacks child ID is not a function, right? Well, because I haven't made it a function, right? I just said that it's a child ID. I've never made it into a function. I could say it's a new function. I want to make it a name, whatever. I could specify what the function is, which is home, but there's no way that I can do it without some kind of actual functional pointer. Not the way I'm doing it right now. Because remember here, with the first one, we were smart, but we passed in a reference to an actual function. We actually had an object we were passing in. Here we're not passing in an object, right? We're not passing in an object in here. So here's what we can do instead, right? We can do the switch case idea again. Remember that switch case, the page loader that we had before? Yeah.
I was going to say, call it a function there that calls another function that says
Yeah. There's things that of course you can do stuff, right? You mean like make a function where?
Somewhere else.
Yeah.
Instead of like having an inline function, call that function.
Yes, we could. Yeah, so instead of doing this, instead of doing this function here, right? My problem is that we'd have to have a named function that's in here, right? Whatever that function name is called based on my child ID. So if you want to do that, right, then we could do that. Like for example, if I said, instead of doing all of this, right? Instead of doing all this, let me just comment this out for a second, and then we'll stop for today, okay? But I wanted to give you guys this idea, right? So if I, again, I'll just like comment it out, block comment. And then we'll just do the same thing. So I don't mess it up. So what if is what you said, right? So instead of doing this, we'll have a named function, and we'll just call it child ID. Whatever that child ID is, this. Is that what you're talking about? I mean, we can try doing it this way. So this is like, okay, when I do this, then go there, you know, kind of thing. And then it says, well, child ID is not a function, right? It's automatically going to be there, right? We could make it so it goes to a specific function that does the switch case. That's something we can do, right? And we kind of have already a structure like that, which was the page switching function, right? This page switching function which did it in the first place, right? So we could do something like that for sure, right? But the idea to put a name that's in here, right? A named function that we want to activate, that is what I want to get to with you guys, right? How do I do it so that I make a function call based on a name that we're just creating, right? That would be really cool. But for now, let's not do this. Let's do that switch case really quickly in here, right? So we'll just do one of these, and then we'll end for the day. So we know this is the case. We know that we're going to get our, whatever child ID is, we're adding an event listener. We know that if it's that we can switch on child ID, switch on child ID. And we can literally just say case about, then we'll hit about, right? Case, if we're looking at, I'll just copy paste here. So we'll say cased home, right? So this will be home, right? And we'll do the rest. So I'll just do those two for now. And what about if I go home? We should be able to go there, right? So if I click on home now, we go to the home function. And you can see that injects home into there, right? And this is all good because it's happening inside of my activate nav bar, right? I'm getting all the links, and depending on which link I'm clicking on, I'm going to inject different content. I can also just, instead of putting it in there, I can just inject content in the page just like this. So now I could like load page content, which is in my main content. So this is another way of doing it. Like just put it right in here. Load page content, main content, home.html, right? Because that's what we want. Can we not do this? And then if I want to do the about, let's just try the about in here. So I'll just show you how to do this, about.html, right? So if I did this, and if I clicked on about, then there it is, right? Does that make sense? Look, if I go home, or if I go about, right? And that's what we want to do for the rest. We want to kind of do all this really quickly for the rest of our pages. And we can just even not do with this thing at all, because all we're doing is we're using a function already. It's already been written for us. So home, about, products. This is products.html, right? Services. And they're probably going to be rushing in here because it's probably a test, so we're going to have to end right now. But you get what I'm doing. Okay, guys? Again, thank you so much for waiting around and listening to this, but you can see now that you can, products and services and about us is all working, and I'll finish the rest for you guys, but you get the way it goes, right? And I can inject content into one page, and we're good to go. And we're doing it automatically. right? So there's nothing for us to do. It's all being done with functions. I'm going to put this up on GitHub for you guys, and I'll update it later on so you have the final code. All right? Guys, thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next week. Remember, on Tuesday next week, we'll have our test on Ajax. Okay? Thank you so much.